So here we go. We have the Transformers Brand Team Fan Roundtable that had just concluded a couple hours ago. And we're going to jump into that. A whole bunch of interesting questions were proposed, gives us some ideas of some stuff that we're going to be getting in the future. And of course, just general questions by the fan in relation to stuff that we've already had revealed to us. So part of this roundtable panel was Ben from marketing. We have Mark and Evan, the two different designers from Hasbro. And new to the Studio Series team, Delaney. She's been added recently. She was part of the global marketing with Hasbro and stuff, mostly with Play-Doh and Nerf, and before that, Star Wars and Marvel. So now she's part of the Transformer team. So welcome, Delaney. And we're going to be jumping into that. So I kind of segmented these into separate categories because the questions were kind of all over the place. So I kind of put them all together based on overall questions, Studio Series, and then our legacy kind of stuff. So let's jump into that. I'll give some of my 2 cents on it too to kind of make sense of what's being said here. And we'll enjoy. I'll put some visuals up as best I can that we could have in relation to this too. So one of the first questions that they asked is, when they're designing toys today, are they more considering collectors in mind and adults, or are they still thinking of kids? Ben says that they still keep kids in mind, giving them that STEM angle of play for the transformation, STEM being science, technology, engineering, and math. I will agree with Ben there. People who collect, and I've talked about this with Aaron Archer too, I find that a lot of Transformer collectors, especially the ones that collected them at a young age, from my generation anyways, a lot of them went into that kind of stuff. I ended up becoming a mechanic in the end, and before that I was in computer science. So there's some kind of part of the brain that really unlocks with that. But anyways, getting back to what I was saying, so he mentions here, they do still keep kids in mind. Obviously, stuff like Legacy is designed to kind of address both, he says here. They do research, and it's always still ongoing. Evan says kids are more into vehicles, less concerned about the characters. And Mark says it's difficult to design for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, but they still love doing it. So kind of a little bit of mixed answers across the board. My personal opinion is I feel that the toy market, especially Hasbro, as time continues, is aimed more towards adults, but within Transformers, there's different segmentations that are aimed at different audiences. So when you look at something like Legacy, I feel that it's aimed more in that betweener. It's for adults, but it could also kind of be for kids. It's not too complicated. Obviously, stuff like Masterpiece and the more high-end stuff is specifically for adults. I think anything that's Generation Selects is completely 100%, even though a lot of them are just repaints, are really just made for the adult market. And then when you look at the more Cyberverse kind of stuff, for some of the more mainline movie toys, not Studio Series, mainline movie like Bumblebee, that's the younger demographic, bots and stuff like that. So it's all over. It really has to do where you look, because for them to say, we don't make stuff for kids, then what is Rescue Bots? So it's all over the place with Transformers, in my opinion. They asked, has the plastic changed since the War for Cybertron trilogy? They say here, plastic and material types have not changed in a long time, not since War for Cybertron. Anything with product issues, please contact our QC line. Well, that one, let's be real, plastic did change after 2014. When they went from Jetta Plastics in China, third-party companies that handle a lot of Hasbro's development of their toys and factory stuff, and then moved to Vietnam, which I'm not familiar with the factory name at the time being, with the Vietnamese factory. It's 2 of them, if I remember correctly. Plastics did change. They went from an ABS to more of an MABS or an SABS plastic. It's still ABS, but it's a less denser ABS. So they are telling the truth. Materials haven't changed. Just the level of prestige of material has changed. And that really has to do also depending on the product. They're obviously not using a cheap ABS with, let's say, a Masterpiece. Again, kind of a catch-all. I'll tell you this, when you mess with some of the Cyberverse product, that's a MABS and SABS plastic completely. But then for some reason, RC in the Cyberverse line, the deluxe class one, was like the most high quality ABS transformer I've messed with from a mainline thing in years. So it's very confusing. It's touch and go. I'm pretty sure the yellowing question probably could have came up too, because that also has to do with the fact that there's a light sensitivity with these new plastics that they're using, which is not the same plastic that was used many years ago. So there's not a lot of transparency with that, unfortunately, but hopefully maybe we'll be able to shake a better answer out of them in the future. The conversation of the open box versus closed box thing came up. And they said here that the open box thing is really for kids. And they find that through research, they found that a closed box doesn't work as well to attract children to want to buy the product. When they could see the product, when they know what they're getting, whether it be an open window, a bubble, it makes them want to get it. Where when it's a closed box, which unfortunately is always featuring art on the front, it doesn't appeal to them as well, so they're losing that market when they do closed box. Where closed box with adult collectors, I think our only concern really is if the paint is well done, because you can't really pick it in a closed box, and of course if the toy has been swapped, which is still a nightmare thing. They also mentioned a follow-up here that because someone said, well, why not just put the toy on the front of the box? And they said that the problem is a lot of the time when you see the toys on the back of the box, it's not actually the actual toy. It's usually a hand-painted prototype or a CG mock-up. They usually don't have the actual item available to them when they're doing the packaging. So it's something where they have to have something done, and they don't want to misrepresent the toy on the front of the box. They rather put it on the back and put, product may vary. In all honesty, I used to play this game all the way back in Armada. We're talking 20 years ago. You look at Armada toys, you flip it around, you look at the back, and, you'd be able to go, okay, which paint apps are missing from Hot Shot that are not on the final product? Because even back then it was hand-painted prototypes and stuff like that. In fact, Mark Mayer, who was on this panel here, was the one in charge of doing a lot of those hand-painted kind of test shots that were used for photography back then. So Mark would know better than anyone. Now he's a designer, but back then he was the color guy, color layouts and everything. So let's just jump quickly into Studio Series. So Studio Series, was a lot of the questions were Dinobot related. The first one was mentioning pretty much the Dinobots from the Michael Bay kind of thing, as well as the Dinobots from our core classes. So first thing they asked was, why no other Dinobots from the Michael Bay movies? Why did we never get any other Age of Extinction Dinobots in Studio Series? They mentioned how the Studio Series 86 Dinobots kind of took over the focus. So they didn't want to kind of go into competition with themselves and create confusion. And again, let's be real, it's also how you pace out the trademark. Oh, we're going to do a slug now, and then we could do a slug in 4 years later, and we don't have to worry about it. So that's also another thing too. Granted, yes, we have our Legends core class ones coming up, so that also kind of defeats that purpose from a trademark standpoint. But I'm just saying, if you do think about it for maybe someone like Swoop or someone that might have been a weird one on the side, that's the case too. And again, look, also at Cyberverse we had Dinobots. There was a lot of Dinobots over the past couple of years. But they said, 86 Dinobots happened, that kind of took over. Not to mention that at the same time when they were developing those 86 Dinobots, the Platinum Edition Dinobot stuff, which was from The Last Night and before that, Age of Extinction, were still kind of a thing on the main line, so they didn't want to also go into competition with that. So that's what kind of existed. So they kind of did that. They're probably going to now circle around and focus on it now in the future. But the Last Night Dinobots, it's just pretty much because they didn't want to compete with themselves. So that's it, more or less. Now let's get into our Legacy Evolution, and Velocitron talk, which made up a huge bulk of the conversation here. So, first one, Tarn. What took so long? And will we see other members of the Decepticon Justice Division? Mark said he's not sure why it took so long. They always had meetings with IDW when he came on, discussing if they could get this character out there. And obviously a lot of their alt modes, and I've said this on the live stream. A lot of those alt modes are difficult to do, unfortunately. But Tarn was one of those ones that could be done, because he was a tank. and there's stuff caked in there that can be done afterwards. But they said, they're looking always into it. They're always trying to think of something, so stay tuned with that. Evan then chimed in and said if there is any kind of problematic alt modes, as he referred to it, they could be turned into other things. So if we can't do an electric chair, then maybe they could do something that's some kind of other object. Who knows? I don't know what you could do. Make it a post or something, and then maybe it could be made into a fan mode of an electric chair. Who knows? I'm pretty sure they'll think of something. And then BMAC chimed in and said maybe we should do a collaboration with Metallica and the electric chair cover, and so we will see. They also mentioned that with the advent of the Tarn toy, they are going out of their way to make sure that both James Roberts and Alex Milne get a copy of the toy for free, which was a problem in the past that sometimes creators of those iconic characters never got a single toy. I'll never forget Derek Wyatt coming to TFCon and going, hey man, I'm looking for, and here's this list of animated toys because he never got them because they don't send him stuff. So I think his big goal was to find Cliffjumper, the activator at that time, the animated one. But yeah, so they're going to be getting them sent. But they said that, they're trying. They're trying. He said Knockout was one of those examples where they were talking with IDW when they were working on that Wreckers book, and they kind of worked that out, that toy ended up in the comic, and the comic, led to the toy and all that stuff. So it's just a matter of having those conversations. Although with the future of IDW being ambiguous with Transformers now, I don't know how that will be with future product and future characters. They talk about here having new characters in Legacy Evolution like Scraphook and why they do it and if there will be more. So they said it's always good to create new stuff while connecting to the existing themes and lore. More to come. Reveals in the new year. Marcelo and Dan Kahana helped out with that concept. I'll be honest with you. I look at something like Scraphook and I kind of put it in the same bubble as what we got with the modulators and the fossilizers, where the more gimmicky kind of price point, those guys that come apart and go back together, they seem to be the ones that'll always be new characters. And I think that, it's funny how everyone was looking at Scraphook and going like, oh my God, new character. But we got a whole bunch with the fossilizers, and in a lot of ways, those modulator Micromaster bases, and in a way were new characters, even though the Micromaster iterations of those trademarks were kind of connected to those too. So still pretty cool. I love Scraphook. I love the idea of another Junkion. So that's cool because, Junkions are this thing that we want to army build, but we don't want to have to buy 50 of the same motorcycle. So to get new molds is always best. And I dig it. They talk about Minerva and they ask, why have you guys not acknowledged her? And then they said, yes, she exists. She's going to be in Walgreens, if not already. And a small amount of them will show up on Hasbro Pulse at some point. And then Mark says, we're going to continue doing more Japanese continuity characters. Mark apologized for not having the Headmaster gimmick there. And again, she was another example of also being put in the Wreckers comic book when she was being developed. Just to give my 2 cents on it, look, it's a Walgreens exclusive. We've seen historically in the past when they have exclusive, and I talked about this with my exclusives individual segment on the podcast. When you have individual exclusives, usually part of that contract with Hasbro is it's up to them to advertise it. So like if Walmart gets a whole bunch of exclusives, or they're doing, XYZ with Amazon, sometimes they don't bother to use that as part of the panel, and they're going to use other things to talk about with these live streams, because they'll leave it to Amazon to advertise it, or Walmart Collector Con to advertise it, and use that as a big reveal. So that's why, look, something like Galaxy Shuttle, which we're going to be talking about too in a moment, but, some of those are just the case like that. So it's just really Walgreens didn't bother to do a crazy press release, I guess is the best way to put it. And when we look at past Walgreens exclusives, it was the same thing. Like, we were never warned in advance, hey, here's Silver Streak. Hey, here's this. Here's Ratchet. They just kind of showed up, It's up to Walgreens at this point. They were asked if there's going to be any more female characters. And they said, absolutely. We're always trying to represent. So that's pretty cool. I think in the past, Mark has said that, they're always going to try to put one female character in a wave now at this point, because there's always a way to either create a new character or represent one from the past, which is great because when you think about it, sooner or later we're going to get the Striker. Sooner or later we're going to get to some of those other ones. You know, a tap out, not tap out, excuse me, a glyph. You know, a Botanica maybe. That'd be great. Or revisiting again some of those female Autobots, or doing them even better than how they were before. So we'll see. We will see. We will see. Not something just out of Siege. We might get something like Earth modes for those female Autobots. Imagine. As if they actually came to Earth or something. Who knows? Speaking of female Autobots, or the male Autobot for me, for Nitro Convoy, Nitro Convoy Override was the key slot, the cyber key slot, in the back, an accident or planned. They said it was not an accident. It was designed by Takara. They wanted to do a nod if they could, much like how Hotshot is going to have a Minicon port. Just wait and see when you get them in hand. So that's a nice little thing to know. More in store with those Minicon without those Minicon ports as well. So it sounds like they have something planned with all this Armada stuff for 2023. They're saying, you know, Japan has a passion for their characters and they always like to get it right. So it sounds like, you know, it was Takara that really wanted to have Nitro Convoy. You know, and I love that. Again, everyone knows it's one of my favorite Transformer characters of all time. Nitro Convoy in Japan was really cool. Really, really cool as a character in Galaxy Force. So, and they just really wanted to have a Nitro Convoy. And then they mention here, Ben is Team Sea Spray. And we haven't gotten to a new deluxe Sea Spray yet, but it'll come at some point. He says the original Sea Spray mold had a alternate merman head on it that never got used. We're going to talk about that in a moment right now, too, about the never got used head here. Because Mark mentions Galaxy Shuttle happened because, and we're talking about the Walmart Galaxy Shuttle. Galaxy Shuttle happened with Velocitron Speedia 500 because there was a second head that was tooled on that design, and they never knew what it was there for or what was going to be used because that was from the John Warden era. And then they mentioned how a lot of toys have always a second head already planned out, even if it doesn't get used. And now it's like, oh, remember what happened with the Megatron Kingdom that had that grin face that we never saw anything done with it? So it is a possibility that there's a lot of Transformer designs in the past that had extra head sculpts that maybe we never even saw them if they never did a repaint with them. And they said now in the original molds, a lot of them in the past that we never used, again, like the Merman one that he mentioned for Sea Spray, as the team changed, sometimes they don't even know that those heads exist on the older figures. And when they dig around and start messing with the molds, they find these heads. And lo and behold, we have a Galaxy Shuttle situation. I mean, look, the best example is like something like Deluxe Class Thunderwing back in Generations. He had two head sculpts right on the mold, and the people who were doing his instructions accidentally put the Black Shadow, aka Sky Shadow head, on the instructions. Same thing happened again with Generations Dark Mount, aka Straxus. When they were doing the instructions, they put Skullgrin's head on the instructions. And again, both of those I just mentioned, those alternate heads and repaints did come out, but here's one that didn't. Deluxe Class Generations Warpath, not the Kingdom one, the original Generations one. In his instructions, in 2 panels, he showed a different head sculpt of Hardhead, the Headmaster character. And we never did get a Hardhead Headmaster's repaint retool of Deluxe Class Warpath. So it shows that there has been a lot of times where these alternate heads were available, always these, for all this time, and we just never knew it. Because, and neither did they until they revisit some of those molds. Evan went on to say, molds are made in 4 quadrants. Usually there's 2 for general releases and 2 for exclusives. That's kind of what's going on now. So that's interesting. That can mean that potentially when you get a Transformer figure, there's 4 different heads maybe planned in advance. And maybe only 2 of those might get used. That's pretty interesting. But then again, not too surprising. Like I say, they never want to waste a mold. They go into here, are we going to see Slipstream in the future? They said anything is possible. Great to have female representation in the line, and those discussions always come up. I'm pretty sure we'll see Slipstream again. Her trademark was used in Cyberverse, so I'm pretty sure they got like 2 years still on that before they have to refresh it and do something again. They could do something right now But I'm just saying they have to do something from a trademark standpoint. They still got a couple years because Cyberverse kind of kept that going. The discussion of Gobots came up primarily because of Crasher now being a trademark and being part of the Velocitron Speedia 500 line. And how is the decision process of getting characters into that line? They said that everyone on Hasbro has their own personal favorites that they want. They do a lot of data mining with the fans to know who they should probably pick. A lot of group conversations are executed. They said the only issue is the designs themselves because GoBots, visually and design-wise, are based on machine robo molds, which were originally Poppy molds that later on became owned by Bandai and get licensed out by Action Toys and other companies, and that's all in Japan. So whatever they do that's GoBot related, if it gets imported back there, it could create some legal issues. So having, Crasher look the way she looks was a safer bet than doing something that was 100% accurate to the original Le Mans Crasher and everything. So it's tough for them. But that being said, I have a suggestion myself, guys. I love Vanguard. He was one of my favorite GoBot characters, and he never had a Machine Robo equivalency. He was part of the Tonka exclusives, MRTs, Machine Robo Tonka. So you could do a Vanguard, take a really nice, when you guys get around to doing Brawn, and you do Brawn, I want you to retool Brawn like crazy and do Vanguard. Or maybe you could take our already existing skids and do Vanguard. But I want to see Vanguard. Make Vanguard happen. That's When I worked on third-party stuff back in the day, I made sure Vanguard happened. There was Vanguardian, the TFCon exclusive from a Brawn mold. So I got to write a comic too with that. So let's see Vanguard. I want to see some more Vanguard. Where are we at here? So then they talk about the core class Dinobots. They ask, what were the challenges in designing them and especially working in a sixth member? Evan says there was challenges. They weren't sure at first, but they felt there was something that they could do. Adding a sixth member to them was part of them making it all core classes instead of deluxes. If there was a sixth member, they probably could have not done it as core class. So they wanted to do it in core. They could do 6 members. That's what they wanted. They don't really mention who that 6th member is, but we could probably figure it out from one of my segments that we just put out a couple of weeks ago. Continuing into that discussion, because they're kind of suggesting what that repaint's going to be. Like I said, my Dino King theory. Are there any pretenders on the table? And then they said, difficult to justify due to cost, but we always look into it. There's always been feedback on the shelves. Bomb Burst fitting into his original Pretender shell mold was unintentional, but a nice surprise, referring to the Bomb Burst legacy figure fits inside. I think a lot of those like core classes and the legends, they kind of fit into their original Pretender shells, so it just kind of works out in the end. But I mean, then you have to go out and buy a junker Pretender shell of a 35-year-old Pretender shell, which is probably not going to be cheap. We just want to have new articulated Pretender shells. Then they also talk about, people were asking, is there any lore in relation to the Dinobots being tiny? And then they just said that, there is no related lore, but you can make up your own story in your head. It's price point thing, guys. That's what it is at the end of the day. It's price points. It's just, it's legend scale stuff. They just want to have tiny Dinobots. And again, Dino King members, Dino King and Monstructor were the smallest combiners of G1. So it just kind of works out. I'm just saying. Then they talk about Japanese characters, the lore, and bringing them over here. They mentioned that using the term convoy is not suggested because of copyright issues, where they just want to be able to call something Optimus Prime or Leo Prime or whatever, and that way they don't have to worry about changing the packaging and the trademarking and stuff when they do it in Japan, even though trademarks in Japan are a whole other animal, and that's why convoy is a thing over there. So there's that. There was the mention of who's that lockdown-looking guy on the box next to the Junkions with the Legacy Evolution stuff. They said, they laughed, and then they said, wait and see. So it's probably lockdown. And the last thing that they mention here is the Cosmos situation. They said there's no word yet on reallocation, meaning shipment of more product to Walmart, adding or not. They weren't aware that the international market was getting full cases of 12. They were not aware of that. And they said that even some of the members of the team don't even have their own personal copies. That's how limited it was. So my 2 cents on it, just wait and see, guys. They're not going to waste that mold. They see that there's a demand. They see that people are asking for it. We're going to get a Cosmos in a different shade of green or something, and that'll be that. It might take 2 years, might take 3 years, but don't go out and spend $80 on a Cosmos. Don't fall for that. Don't. Your opportunity will present itself, and your wallet will thank you later. And the last thing that they said, just to kind of close this all out, was as Transformer fans, we should be really excited about the Premium Pulse 1027 that's going to be coming up, which what they're referring to is their live stream that they're going to be doing on October 27th. It's going to be at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Weird, at 5 p.m. That's a little later than what they normally do. And they're going to have brand new product reveals, giveaways, and some brand new pre-orders that will go live with those product reveals. So very interesting. What's going to be shown then? And that's just a week away. Exactly a week away, actually. So we'll see what happens with that. That's pretty hype stuff. So they just said be sure to check that out next week. And, you know, us here on the podcast will talk about it too. And again, thank you again, Hasbro, for the Transformers brand team fan roundtable Q&A. Some interesting stuff that were said. Let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you again real soon.